Mahatma Gandhi's involvement in the Indian national movement played a very crucial role because the national movement now gained mass participation. That is, now all the Indian masses were now supporting the nationalist movement. They were actively engaged in this movement. Now, Mahatma Gandhi was envisaging non-violent protests and demonstrations. He had launched the non-cooperation movement in the year 1920 against British colonial rule. And while he did so, he was wanting to fight against the British colonizers through non-violent ways. But many Indian masses who were believing that they were actually following the lead of Mahatma Gandhi resorted to very violent means. Now, the Chauri Chaura incident of 1922 was a very violent thing that happened during this non-cooperation movement. The angry revolutionaries stormed at a police station and they burned down an entire police station with all the people in it. Now, this compelled Mahatma Gandhi to call off the non-cooperation movement because he was not at all looking forward to fighting violently against the British colonizers. But these people who were following Gandhiji's lead were actually believing that they were following the true Gandhian principles. But why did they stray away from the Gandhian principle of non-violence? And how did these people over time celebrate Gandhiji as their hero? This now brings us to a discussion on the people's Mahatma. In this lesson, we will be talking about how Gandhiji became not just a leader to the Indian masses, but he came to them as an almost savior-like figure. So let us now begin this discussion on the people's Mahatma. Now, Gandhi was interpreted very differently by various sections of the society. So, while many people were actually resorting to very violent means, they were actually believing that they were following the footsteps of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, Mahatma Gandhi never advocated violent means. He was one who was looking forward to having negotiations and discussions with the British government, and at the same time he propagated the usage of non-violent and peaceful demonstrations and means to fight British colonial rule. But his Gandhian ideals and principles were interpreted very differently by various sections of the society, and all these sections of the society actually held Mahatma Gandhi as their hero while in the process of straying away from the Gandhian ideals. Now, Gandhi was considered a messiah by many people. Why is it so? Because Gandhiji was not just a leader to these Indian masses. Instead, they believed that Gandhiji was given many supernatural powers. And by these supernatural powers, he could alleviate the miserable condition of the lives of Indian masses. These people believed that Gandhiji would be able to help them achieve freedom. And at the same time, these people believed that Gandhiji also possessed many magical powers. And by these magical powers, Gandhiji was able to heal them. Gandhiji was able to bring them salvation, so to speak. And in this way, many people did not even know who or what Gandhiji was. All they believed in was a mythical construction of Gandhiji's power, which compelled them to believe Gandhi as their messiah. Now, many sections of the Indian society were fighting their own wars against the British colonizers, and at the same time the peasants were not just exploited by the colonizers, but the zamindars and the landowners were just as exploitative. These peasants were compelled to work on the lands that were owned by the zamindars and the landowners, and in the process of this they were severely exploited. They were not paid properly, and at the same time they were also often beaten by the zamindars. Now, these peasants believed that Gandhi would help them in their fight against the zamindars. So these people were of the opinion that Gandhiji was not just helping them in their fight against the British colonizers, but Gandhi was their messiah, their savior, to help them fight against the zamindars, and the agricultural laborers believed that he would provide them land. But Gandhiji was not a person who was providing lands to these people, because Gandhiji was never actually looking forward to class conflicts. He was wanting to achieve class unity so that all the Indian masses are brought on the same plane in their fight against the British colonizers. But these peasants who held on to a mythical construction of Gandhiji believed that Gandhiji would help them get new lands. So these were some of the ideas that were constructed on and around the person of Gandhiji. Now during this time, ordinary people used to credit Gandhiji with their own achievements. Now what was happening around this time? Many ordinary people were organizing their own local protests and movements against the British colonizers. And while they were gaining small but success nevertheless, they were believing that it was Gandhiji who was spearheading all the movements. But more often than not, Gandhiji was not a part of these local movements and demonstrations, but these people found security and comfort in the fact that Gandhiji was their leader, that Gandhiji was the person whose footsteps they were all following. Now this illustration shows you clearly how Gandhiji is spearheading a movement and these people are merely following his footsteps in their fight against the colonizers. Now when we talk about ordinary people crediting Gandhiji with their own achievements, we should definitely mention the peasants of Pratapgarh. Now let me tell you a brief backstory about these peasants. Now Pratapgarh was located in the United Provinces, which is the present day Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, and here the peasants had to work on the lands which were owned by the zamindars and the rich and wealthy landowners. Now these rich and wealthy landowners often very arbitrarily and randomly evicted the peasants from the lands, and the peasants did not have any rights over their lands, which is why they were often forcefully evicted. And in the process of these peasants were unemployed and they had to struggle and suffer with poverty. But these peasants were the ones who were actually working on the lands for the zamindars. Now these peasants for quite some time have been fighting against this oppressive practice of eviction which was performed by the zamindars, and over time they managed to stop illegal eviction of tenants. Now while they did so, they actually credited Gandhiji for this. So can you understand how Gandhiji, who was never a part of this peasants' movement and rebellion against the zamindars and landowners who performed illegal eviction, was made a part of it? Gandhiji did not even know and he did not spearhead this movement. It were the peasants themselves who fought for their own rights, but Gandhiji, simply as the messiah and savior of these people, was held as the leader of this movement. Now this kind of a thing continued to happen when Gandhiji's popularity kept on surging in the minds of the Indian masses. The Indian masses found security and comfort, as we just mentioned, simply by believing that Gandhiji was their leader, that Gandhiji was actually walking on the way to bring them freedom from the British colonizers. Now the tribals and the peasants were following Gandhian ideals, and Gandhi was also all in favor of these tribals and these peasants' protests against the colonizers as well as the landowners who used to exploit these poor people. But more often than not, these tribals and peasants' protests took very violent turns. And Gandhi was never a person to sanction these violent protests and demonstrations, because Gandhian ideals were all for non-violence. And these people also did not conform to this Gandhian ideal of non-violence when violent methods were used by them. But they continued to believe that they were actually walking behind Gandhiji. They were actually carrying forward Gandhi's legacy by organizing their own movements. Now all this was happening simply because a mythical construction of Gandhiji and his persona was in place during the happening of the Indian national movement. So in this lesson we learnt about the crucial role that Gandhi had played in bringing together and uniting the Indian masses. Now Gandhi ensured mass participation, but at the same time a mythical construction of Gandhiji was in place during this time. Gandhiji did not really have any control over this. He was not the one to propagate this image of himself in the minds of the people. But he was not also in control of what the masses believed he was. And the masses often resorted to very violent methods simply in the name of following Gandhian ideals. Now when these things used to happen, as in when violent protests and rebellions used to break out in the name of Gandhian ideal, Gandhi simply did not sanction this. Instead, he used to call this mobocracy. That is to say, the angry mobs were following their own course of action, and their violent course of action had nothing to do with the Gandhian ideal of non-violence. But a very sacrosanct and revered image of Gandhiji was worshipped by the Indian masses, and this image corroborates the same idea. Here we can see a pantheon of God, and here we can see the chariot, and this chariot is being led by Gandhiji. So by seeing this chariot, if we draw reference to Arjun's chariot which was seen in Mahabharata, we will be able to see that Gandhi was placed in the place of Lord Krishna. It is as if, like Lord Krishna, he was taking ahead this nationalist movement. So it was under his leadership that the Indians were now on the verge of getting their freedom and independence from colonial rule. So this was the image of Gandhiji, an almost god-like divine image that used to be worshipped by the Indian masses, which is why he was known as the People's Mahatma. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million-plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.